the Dentalpreneur podcast. Okay, doctor, it's time to put down that handpiece. You're listening to the show dedicated to helping dentists get their lives back. It's time to decrease your stress, increase your profitability, and regain your passion. Now introducing your host, Dr. Mark Costas.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. What is up, my friends? All right, we're here live at Thrive Live in Las Vegas, 2026. It's been a very, very busy and fun Thrive so far. This is my 13th podcast that I've done so far, and many more to go. Getting a great opportunity to meet a lot of nice people and to reconnect with old friends. Somebody that I'm interviewing right now has been on the podcast, I want to say at least 4 times, maybe 5, 6, I don't know. But let's welcome back to the podcast somebody that I hold in very high regard. Her name is Wendy Briggs, and she's a registered dental hygienist with more than 25 years of experience. For more than 16 years, Wendy has helped thousands of dentists take control of their practice and uncover millions of dollars of unseen, untapped revenue by serving their patients at a higher level. Production is never the goal. It's the result of taking great care of our patients. Wendy, welcome back to the podcast. How are you?
Hey, thanks. I'm doing great. It's fun to be here.
It's good to see you again. I assume you're speaking a lot this weekend?
Yes, I lectured Wednesday afternoon, which was surprising. I didn't know people were here.
Interesting.
Yet,
I didn't either.
Yeah, and then I lecture again tomorrow. So my partner, Dr. John's, lectured a few times as well. So it's been great.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to be here.
You're kind of one of the big names in hygiene training. And I've known about you for many, many years. Well respected. There's so many things to talk about. Hygiene has changed so much since I owned my very first practice in 2003. And it's just a totally different world.
It is. It's fraught with challenges and constant change. So it can be tough for people to keep up, for sure. Yeah, so I'm just going to throw some things out to you. I did a little bit of research. Thank you, chat. 15,300 open hygiene positions right now in the world. There's about 215,000 active hygienists in the country right now. About 225,000 active dentists. So we're a little bit less than 1-to-1 ratio. And we all know as coaches and consultants and people that run sophisticated productive practices that the ideal kind of ratio is like 2-to-1, but we're not 2-to-1 as far as the number of actual humans that are in the hygiene profession. So with that becomes this pendulum, the law of supply and demand. If there's not enough supply, the demand goes up, and so does the cost of that product or human. Right.
So that's what we're experiencing right now. Have you been helping people in a lot? I'm asking you this as what are you helping people rather to do in order to fill those positions? And if they're unable to fill those positions, what are the alternatives, a different structure maybe for their practice?
Yeah, it's a real challenge right now, right? As you mentioned, there's not enough hygienists. We had 19,000 leave the profession permanently after COVID.
Oh, that's a good statistic, really.
Yes, 19,000 providers stepped away, never to return. And there's a variety of reasons for that as you dig in. But the ADA Health Policy Institute states still today that one of the top challenges facing dentistry is the inability to hire. Hygienists is probably a more urgent thing, but assistants are a problem too in many areas. And I think the reason for that is interesting too, because if you look at the society at large had to raise wages everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so, we ask a lot of our dental assistants, it's a tough job. And if they can make the same amount of money going and working at, In-N-Out Burger, for example, they're going to do that, right? So it's not just the hygienists, it's assistants as well. But hygienists, there are certain areas of the country where it's really, really challenging. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we kind of take a step back and try and help the practice focus on what they are offering that's different. Yeah. And I think our shift needs to be moving away from hiring more into focusing on recruiting. Why should a prospective hygienist want to join our practice, our team? What can we offer that's different than the masses? A lot of hygienists still want the temp gig, and that's an interesting thing. I just read an interesting article about the future of work and how even 17% of dental professionals say they are interested in, gig labor, temp labor. And I think the reason for that, we can learn from, right? They want more flexibility. Mm-hmm. They want more control over their hours. So I think the days of saying, hey, we want a full-time hygienist and we're very, very inflexible, those days are gone if you want to recruit and hire good people. But then the other thing is, our compensation structure has to evolve. And when we work with practices, we help them set up a compensation structure that makes sense for the practice, the patient, and the provider. And our doctors that are promoting that and able to recruit off of that model are doing really well because they can state that they provide unlimited earning potential for their hires. And so basically they have the opportunity to earn a bigger future if they provide excellent world-class care. So there's a lot of different variables in that, but I think we've got to move away from hiring into a recruiting mindset.
Yeah, I like that. Now, I'm assuming you're talking about some sort of a percentage compensation for production. And if that's the case, I've heard, and I've actually experienced this myself as a practice owner, that a lot of hygienists kind of shut down if you're trying to talk about some sort of a percentage production versus some sort of an hourly guaranteed wage. What does the conversation sound like so that we can overcome their bias? And it might come from their dental hygiene professor. It might come from a scarcity mentality where they don't know the type of patient flow that you're going to have. It might be from a number of different ways, but a number of different reasons. But how do we overcome that? What's the good verbiage in order to overcome that bias?
Yeah, well, I think we're probably talking about two different things, right? So in our model, we have 4 or 5 different ways that we can help practices structure their comp program.
Okay.
We have a lot of different variables in that, right? So we need to look at the hourly wage, what percentage of write-offs does a practice have? Are we looking at a gross production number or an adjusted production number?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different things that we try and figure out, okay, what's the current state of the practice? But our most popular comp model is usually a hybrid.
Okay.
Which means their hourly wage stays the same.
Oh, okay.
So what hygienists are usually fearful of or have had negative experiences with in the past is a straight commission percentage. And the reason is there's so much in that practice that we don't control. We don't decide which insurance plans to sign up for, for example, and therefore the write-offs feel out of our control. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when we're on a strict commission, they're looking at collections, not production, and we don't control that either. We aren't the ones making the financial arrangements. We aren't the ones having those conversations with patients, and those conversations are critical. They can make or break collections in a practice. We see wide swings between practice locations and, frankly, personalities that are in charge of that. So those are things that the hygienists feel are outside our control. You mentioned the schedule too. If the schedule falls apart, is there someone who's going to own that, that values a full schedule as much as the hygienist that's on a straight commission? There's nobody else in the practice that really takes it as seriously as that provider will. Mm-hmm. So that's why many of the practices that we work with, we choose to set up a hybrid where the hourly wage does stay the same. Okay. And then we run through, 4 or 5 different variables through our formula, and then we can help the practice figure out what their baseline should be for profitability. Okay. And once the provider produces above that baseline, then there's profit sharing that exists. And so I think you can have the best of both worlds. And when you have something structured that way. Mm-hmm. And of course, there needs to be guardrails in place. You've got to have strong core values. You've got to understand that, no one is going to be okay if we sacrifice the quality of care for quantity so that we boost our paycheck. All of those things are really important. Yep. And maybe somewhat, I'm assuming that we have those things sorted out as well, because we all want what's best for patients. And so we certainly don't want providers that are strictly money driven. But frankly, I haven't met very many like that, right? Yeah, so I think it's a common worry in the back of our mind that really doesn't come about in reality very often. But when you have those things sorted out, what you get is hygienists that think a little bit more like an associate, right? They own their own department. Back in the day when I was setting this up initially myself, I told my doctor I want the ability to hire and fire my own team. Wow. So I wanted to really be able to run hygiene in the way that I thought it could be run and really provide valuable service to the patient, but also contribute to the growth of the practice. And so when it's set up and structured the right way, it really is amazing how quickly we see results. And to be honest, Dr. Costas, when we set that up and include the systems that we teach the hygienists on, that's why the very next day, there's impact. Yeah. Measurable, significant impact in hygiene revenue.
Such a good answer. Thank you. I want to talk to you about the evil production word, right? So a lot of times when we're trying to motivate a team member and explain to them that, in order to justify your existence, you need to produce X amount of dollars. And I mean, you can see automatically that deflates people, and they get defensive, or they're just not interested in hearing about production. They want to be a healer. They want to help be a healthcare provider. How do we walk that fine line of encouraging them to do more procedures without turning them off, as far as pushing them to do more procedures and produce more dentistry?
Right. Well, it's a very valid point. In fact, it's a constant debate on social media, which frankly is exhausting. I'm sure you get exhausted by that as much as I do.
I just tune it out now.
Right. I mean, it's almost a daily occurrence in some of these social media groups. And I understand it. I understand the frustration. But here's the thing. Too many voices out there are telling hygienists what we should be doing. And I believe we're starting in the wrong place, if that's the conversation. Instead, we should really be investigating why. Why does hygiene in today's world matter? If we can all agree that patients deserve the very best care, then it's about, let's take a step back and define what that means in today's world, right? So we're very much focused on the science, and we focus on why these services matter. And when we look at hygiene from our 30,000 foot view, we see a healthcare provider, certainly, but this healthcare provider does exist in the confines of a small business, typically. And so we have to have an awareness of what we're actually producing out of hygiene, because if we don't, then it's unsustainable. And that's why you see some of these models of going hygienist free and all of this nonsense that can kind of, frankly, it's a distraction for many people.
Yeah.
And so I think, understanding why hygiene can and should be elevated in practices, looking at the roles of hygienists. In our world, we focus on the role of the hygienist as a preventive therapist, a periodontal therapist, and a patient treatment advocate. And when we take a step back and have that conversation about what world-class hygiene looks like today, it all begins with risk assessment, right? So, I think more than anything, we tend to blame our people, when in reality, it's often a systems failure. So if we have systems in place like risk assessment for everybody, then we look at, okay, now what services on our preventive menu? If we have a high-risk patient in the chair, they need a different level of care than a patient who's moderate or low risk. Like, that's a given. Yeah. So then what does that actually mean? Well, it means that they need, to begin with, fluoride. It's such a simple thing. But what percentage of acceptance are we seeing in hygiene? Okay. That's an easy place to start. Then we look at how else can we protect the teeth? It might be sealants. It might be what we call bonded protective agents. It might be, Curodont or enamel remineralization service on those incipient lesions. All of those things come into play. Yeah. And guess what? With the right systems in place, with the right mindset, when we do risk assessment, we don't have to harp on hygiene providers about production. Let's just look at the systems and let's make sure we're serving our patients at the highest possible level and that they have the skills. So why is just part of it. Then they need the how. Yeah. So too often we get stuck on the what we want them to do, but they don't understand how to change what they're doing every day. Yeah. What does that look like? I have a limited amount of time with every patient. I'm already feeling like I'm running around with my hair on fire. Yeah. How am I supposed to do all of this in the confines of the time constraints that we have? Once we sort that out, amazing things happen. Hygienists all over the country come up to us and say, oh my gosh, 20 years ago I heard you speak and my professional life changed from that moment on. And it's not because I was there every day in the operatory. It's just because they understood what they were capable of when they were shown a different way of thinking about it and a different way of approaching patient care. It's really humbling and awesome when that happens. Yeah. But, it's often that hygienists, we would love to be more productive, but no one's really shown us how. That's why I do what I do.
I really, really like that. The focus goes away from production and it goes to delivering optimal care, and the production becomes a byproduct of that.
Right. It just naturally follows. When we elevate the care we provide, the production does take care of itself. And I know that sounds somewhat ridiculous because doctors are like, well, I've tried to get my hygienist to do X, Y, and Z for this many years and it's never happened. And my hygienists are resistant and they don't want to change. And I'm like, no, they just don't know how to do it. Yeah. They don't know how to change what they're doing now and convert it into what you're hoping for from them without some coaching and structure and some guidance. And once they have those things, then they just take off.
Yeah, for sure. What's your view on assisted hygiene or working a staggered schedule in 2 rooms?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan personally of assisted hygiene, but it has to be done the right way. Okay. There's certain nuances that many people don't get right. Okay. One example is we often hire the least qualified assistant to be the hygiene assistant,
it's
right?
So true. It's like where they start. It's like sterile tech, hygiene assistant, and regular assistant.
And that's a tactical mistake that really is very costly because if you think about it, 75% of the restorative dentistry comes from hygiene.
So true.
So who do you want talking about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You want your most experienced assistant. You want someone who knows the systems of the practice that can drive things. I view the hygiene assistant as a partner, a literal partner with the hygiene team, but they have to basically have the respect of the hygiene team. They're the people at the airport with the orange vests and the cones.
Yeah.
They're directing traffic, but how can they do that if they're the least experienced assistant? That's one thing.
Right.
The other thing is often in that model where they have the least experienced hygiene assistant, once they get good, they get stolen away for the restorative side and we're starting over.
That's right.
That's a problem. Other things is, sometimes practices will shift to an assisted model when the doctor's already out of capacity, and that's a tactical error. It's going to fall.
When the doctor's what?
Out of capacity
out
themselves.
Out of capacity, okay.
Right? And
so they're seeing more hygiene patients, doing more recall exams, teeing up more treatment, and they're already booked out 3 months.
Right. And their own personal production goes down and suffers.
Yeah, got it.
Right? So their production per visit on the doctor's side takes a hit. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
So you have to have, a qualified system for everyone to follow with an assisted hygiene model to work well. And then the other thing is, in my mind, there's a huge difference between an assisted model and an accelerated model. And a lot of practices are trying to shorten hygiene appointments down. They're like, well, the hygienists have an assistant, so we're going to make all adult appointments 40 minutes. Or 30 minutes. It's the height of ridiculous, because really, if we want an assisted model, the hygienist has an assistant working with them, much like the doctor does an assistant. And we're not going to take, a 1 hour crown prep and shorten it to 40 minutes just because the doctor has an assistant.
Yeah.
There's still a quality of care that we're trying to deliver in that time. And so in our world, an assisted model, we use the same amount of appointment time, but instead of one qualified professional taking care of that patient, we now have 2.
Yeah.
And that makes us more efficient, certainly, but it means that, my 2 hands as a hygiene provider, I'm doing things that almost always the ideal is to have me doing tasks that only a licensed hygienist can do, and to delegate most everything else. But that also doesn't mean that I take that as a chance to go sit on my rear end in the staff lounge and look at People magazine when my assistant's cranking 2 patients, right? So I think there's a few things that can happen that can derail that. And as well, too often hygienists feel somewhat trapped when we shift them into that model without an increase in compensation.
Yeah.
So that has to be fair, and frankly, sometimes we try to, say that they deserve the same hourly wage because they're already ridiculously compensated in some areas of the country. And, you get it. We hear those things. And so it's got to be a win-win-win. Patient has to win first. Practice has to win, but the provider also deserves a win if they're going to be willing to shift to that. And, there are resources we have. That's one of the courses that we teach is an assisted hygiene model. And certainly we've helped even large groups shift to that in locations where we have a difficult time hiring. We're covering maternity leaves or something like that. I much prefer an assisted model than a temp hygienist all day long when it's done well.
So true. Okay. So, you have straight production. That's one value of the hygienist. Another additional huge value potential is how well they pre-sell treatment or tee up treatment for the doctor. Tell us how you set that up correctly so that they're not giving one message and the doctor's giving another, or they're contradicting the assistant or the front office person. What does that look like to set that up so that hygienist becomes really, really valuable as far as how much diagnosis and treatment planning is getting accepted from their chair?
Yeah, interestingly enough, this is something that the doctors typically need to lead on.
Okay.
And so, we've all heard from that doctor that's like, oh my gosh, my hygienist of 10 years left. I'm dying. The new one doesn't know anything. They don't understand how I recommend treatment, and I'm walking in blind every exam. And really that's, again, a systems failure. Mm-hmm. In our world, we call that role the patient treatment advocate role. And that really is about how the hygienist partners with the doctor to convert treatment. And so there's, again, systems that we teach. That one really is about understanding the diagnostic assertiveness level of the doctor. And you can have 2 doctors under the same roof with wide variation in how they diagnose, right?
Yeah.
So there needs to be some calibration there on diagnostic assertiveness. We also look as well at something we call treatment planning for predictability.
Okay.
And this is something by which, we really should have written out systematic standard operating procedures for when a doctor sees a tooth that looks like this is what the doctor is going to recommend.
Okay. Yep.
And when we have that written out, we can take that hygienist. It's only been, we say 90 days, give us 90 days. And we can have that provider up to the level of the 10-year provider, provided we take the time and we work on that, and we talk about treatment planning for predictability, and we preheat the patient before the doctor comes in, because in a perfect world, Dr. Koss, as you step in, I do a trust transfer, as we call them.
Yep.
And you can look at me and just say, you're exactly right, Wendy, that's what they need. Let's get it done. Boom, done, out you go.
Yes.
Right? But again, we have to make things visual. We have to use the right language. We call that tribal language. And those are things that we work on in great detail.
Yeah. Tribal language, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we want the patient involved in that language too.
Yeah.
So part of tribal language is using words that you didn't learn in dental school, you didn't learn in hygiene school. These are words that the patients can understand and follow. We walk through phrases that can help create a higher level of urgency. Something like, you know, I'm worried about that crack. Let's talk about that. You know, making things visual using digital scans, but as well.
I was going to ask you about that. Intraoral pictures, yes. Digital scans for everybody. What do you usually suggest there?
Certainly that's up to each individual doctor and what their diagnostic philosophy is. I'm a big fan of a digital scan, a minimum once a year, because you can then use that, blow that up big as life, and see that cracked molar. However, sometimes the clarity isn't quite there on some of those digital scans, and so there are circumstances where, you know, making it visual is really important, and you can take an intraoral camera and get a high definition, crystal clear picture of those cracks, the dark areas around those cracks, and all of a sudden the patient says to you, you don't have to say anything, that doesn't look good. You know, that looks bad.
Yeah.
And so that's the magic of making things visual. So all of those things, that was a lot.
No, that's
all
great.
of those things kind of put together is what helps practices grow. And I've got some really interesting data.
Yeah.
Because I just did a case study on this with one of our longtime clients. He was about 220 was his production per visit before he learned some of those systems that we just talked about. 220 doctors production per visit. Okay. So he knew there was opportunity there. And he was in a bread and butter area, low socioeconomic area, did a lot of single tooth dentistry.
Okay, yeah, sounds like it.
Helped the team, worked on that, and he's above 880 just a few years later, because now we've got the team driving that. He's made things visual. He's having higher level conversations with his same patient base. That didn't change.
Yeah, that's great.
But by partnering with the team and you know, helping preheat the patient more effectively, you know, that's the intangible. We don't measure that as hygiene production, but that's the power of a strong doctor hygiene partnership.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So with this, do you see any relief in sight? I mean, you kind of have your finger on the pulse. The problem is there's not enough dental hygiene schools. The problem is that hygienists don't want to be teachers because they can make a lot more money in the field. Additionally, people are liking the money and flexibility that comes with temp hygiene work. Is there relief in sight? When is this going to... Because I also heard a statistic that 35 to 40% of the current hygiene population workforce is supposed to retire in the next 5 to 7 years. So that's going to exacerbate the problem even more so than it is right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, here's the thing. We do know that hygiene schools are increasing their class sizes. I teach a hygiene business course at a really innovative hygiene school. It's the first one in the country owned by a dentist. So I think there's innovators and entrepreneurs that are entering that space because they see it's a need. And so I think that's gratifying to know that. I think another part of our problem is the existing workforce is so negative about hygiene because of some of these challenges. And frankly, some of their concerns are very real and valid. But it also is disappointing to me, you know, as a longtime hygiene advocate and hygiene, consultant. To me, I think there's never been a better time to be a dentist or a hygienist. And I know costs are high. I know there's the challenges are out there, but practices that really invest in both time and energy in making things better are seeing tremendous, like record growth, record opportunity exists. And patients will always need dentists. Yeah. Dentists will always need hygienists. And so I think, you know, as we see the hygiene class sizes increasing, we see states, you know, making changes to their laws. That's a whole nother podcast, Dr. Costas. But in reality, I can tell you that I think things will continue to get better as we help hygienists and doctors know how to leverage the talent they have and shift to an assisted model when possible, when it's appropriate. Yeah. That's going to help alleviate some of the stress. And here's the thing, you don't have to worry about what's happening out in society at large as much as you do focusing on your own practice. Fix your culture, fix your systems, create a big opportunity for your patients, for your team members in your community, and you won't have any real problems. I think, you know, things will get better if you focus on your little sphere of influence in the world.
Yeah, I always say control what you can control. Level 10 Hygienists aren't going to go work for a level 5 provider. So do everything you can to be a level 10 operator, and
100%.
Everything else will take care of itself.
And
hopefully.
That's what I say to the hygienist. You create your own job security. Don't worry about what's out there. You create your own. Doctors can do the same thing. They can create a practice that no team member wants to leave.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
That's definitely true.
Yep.
Wendy, thank you so much for everything you do for the profession. Thank you for always being open to take the time to be on the podcast. You've been such a ray of sunshine in our profession, particularly this challenging time in hygiene. So I thank you so much for all of that.
Well, it's a pleasure. And I could say all of the same right back to you, Dr. Costas.
Well,
so we appreciate your effort as well.
I appreciate you very much.
Always
all right.
a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wendy Briggs.
Thanks, everybody.